In 2016, Trump achieved a historic feat by breaking into the blue wall by flipping Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. These states had voted Democratic in the last 6 presidential elections. As a matter of fact, in George H.W. Bush's 40 state landslide in 1988, he could not carry Wisconsin as Michael Dukakis won the state by 3.6 percentage points. And yet Trump managed to flip the state in 2016. However, there was some warning signs that the blue wall in these areas may not be as stable as you think. And in this case, we're going to look at other areas where Republicans could potentially break through the blue wall. Note that the red wall is a lot more fluid of a concept. Also note that for the blue wall, you have to have voted Democratic starting in 1992. There are some near-miss states that I'm going to acknowledge right now. New Mexico only voted Republican once when Bush won it by 0.8 percentage points, but we're not going to mention that. Since then, Democrats have won the state by over 5 percentage points every single time, but in 2024, Harris only won the state by 6 percentage points, so it's not as solid for Democrats as they might like. We're also not counting New Hampshire, because in 2000, Bush won the state by 1.3 percentage points. Note that even in that case, though, Harris only won the state by 3 points, and Clinton only won the state by 0.4 percentage points. So New Hampshire is very prone to potentially flipping to a Republican candidate in the future. It's very prone, much more prone than New Mexico, in my opinion. But there are other states like Colorado and Virginia that have become reliable Democratic strongholds. However, this only started in 2008. But anyway. So as you can see on a blue wall map, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania all folded. And there are all these states that are still blue wall states. However, some of these states, are more prone to flipping than others, and we're going to get into that. Look at the 2024 election results as an example. Obviously, California, Washington, Vermont, Massachusetts, Maine's first, Maryland were all in a solid Democratic category. And Delaware, Connecticut, Oregon, and Rhode Island, other blue wall states, Harris won all of those by over 13 percentage points. New York, Harris won by 12.6 percentage points. Colorado voted the furthest to the left of any state that is not considered part of the blue wall. It voted for Harris by 11 points. The reason why it's not in the blue wall is because in 2004, Bush won it. In 2000, Bush won it by a considerable amount. And in Bill Clinton's 1996 landslide over Bob Dole still carried the state of Colorado. So Colorado's turning blue has been a very recent development. Nonetheless, you have that. But then you look at some of these blue wall states and you see how close they are. Maine, at large, Harris only won by 6.9 percentage points. Minnesota, Harris only won by 4.2 percentage points. New Jersey, Harris only won by 5.9 percentage points. These are all close results. I forgot about Hawaii, which is 23 points for Harris. These are all close results that could be indicative of a potential flip. Minnesota and Maine are even more damning, seeing as Clinton only won Maine by 2.9 percentage points in 2016, and Minnesota is only 1.5 percentage points. Now, 1988 was the last time that Maine and New Jersey went for Republicans. Minnesota didn't even go for a Republican in 1984, as in the late 20th century, it was historically one of the bluest states in the country. The last time Minnesota went red was in 1972. Even then, Nixon only won a state by 5.5 points, and Minnesota was the closest state in the nation and the second most Democratic state in the nation, behind only Massachusetts, which McGovern won. Minnesota used to be a very, very, very blue state that now is turning into more of a swing state, but one that Republicans still can't win. What makes Maine even more of an impressive case is that in Maine, we currently see that in 2020, Susan Collins was elected as a Republican senator. So Maine is a state that has actually elected Republicans before. And it's not just like to the governorship where they have nothing else. Like they have a Senate seat. And in Minnesota, now that I can show you on this map, they have a split house. So it's not a Democratic trifecta either. Minnesota and Maine are the two states that I think Republicans have tried to flip the most, but New Jersey's coming into play. Harris only won it by 5.9 points. Now, New Jersey's a more recent development. We talked about in 2016 how Minnesota and Maine were close. New Jersey was not close at a 14-point landslide for Clinton. 2004, New Jersey was relatively close at 6.7%, closer than Maine at 9, but not as close as Minnesota at 3.5. You know, and New Jersey again, it's a bit more recent. It's swing to the right, shall I say? Because here's the thing. Here's what I want you to note about with the blue wall states. In 1992, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania were all considerably blue. Wisconsin a bit close, but yeah. And they were all double digits except for Pennsylvania for Clinton in 1996. 2000, though, Wisconsin is in a tilt Democratic column. Gore wins it by 0.22. Pennsylvania and Michigan aren't landslides either. You know, looking at those blue wall states, Minnesota is closer at 2.4, but these states certainly aren't blowouts by any stretch of the imagination. Oregon was actually also really close at 0.44%. I forgot that. 2004, you know, we have Michigan at 3.4, Pennsylvania at 2.5, Wisconsin at 0.38. So these states, which at this point are now closer to Minnesota and Oregon, again, another warning sign that these signs are prone to flipping. 2008, Obama wins in a landslide. We see Michigan voting for Obama by over 16 points, Wisconsin by 14, Pennsylvania by 10. 2012, Pennsylvania's 5.4 points, Wisconsin 6.9, Michigan 9.5. So these states, you know, while they were consistent for Obama, they had warning signs that Republicans could potentially do well there. I believe also before they flipped, Wisconsin and Michigan had Republican trifectas in the statewide government. Pennsylvania did not, but Republicans did have trifectas in Wisconsin and Michigan, which indicated that they were potentially prone to a flip that nobody expected. Now, what I will say is a bit surprising as you look at states on this list, like Virginia, for example, which was closer than these three states, all three states, and it did not flip. Colorado, which is the same as Pennsylvania and closer to Michigan and Wisconsin, does not flip. New Hampshire does not flip. Nevada does not flip yet. Minnesota does not flip. Maine 2nd District does flip, and Iowa does flip to become reliable Republican states, but only Maine 2nd was ever really in the blue wall in the first place. So there were these warning signs that these would be prone to flipping. Now, I said I wouldn't mention the Red Sea too much, but it's tough to really say. I guess because again, you have states like Florida, Ohio, and Iowa that have really only voted for the Republicans in 3 elections in a row. North Carolina, Indiana are 4, and of course, Indiana's reliably Republican today. North Carolina is a swing state, so it's tough to really say. But Indiana is a bit of an example of them breaking through a reliable, you know, Republican state. The state voted by over 5% for the Republicans in every election going back to 1964, and all of a sudden, in 2008, Indiana, in a fluke, flips blue. Obama wins it by 1 percentage point. Before Obama loses it by over 10 in 2012, and since 2016, it's been in a safe Republican column. But that's one example. Now, of these states, it's tough to really tell which ones are prone to flipping. We did see Biden break through in both Georgia and Arizona. He won these states for the first time since the 90s. 1996 for Arizona, 1992 for Georgia. But again, there were some warning signs that this, you know, could happen. They were never, you know, the biggest states, you know, like they were never in a solid Republican column except for Georgia being solid Republican in 2004. 2008, McCain wins Arizona in a landslide, but that's his home state, 8.5 points. Georgia, though, 5.2. So all of a sudden, Georgia becomes in play and is actually the third closest Republican win in 2008. Of course, Arizona was further to the right than South Dakota, but not North Dakota. You look at 2012 and the results in these states. Romney improves, but again, these do look like potential pickup targets for Democrats. I think 2016, you look at Arizona and Georgia, Trump gets worse than both Romney and McCain. He only wins Georgia by 5.1, Arizona by 3.5. Again, the warning signs were there, especially in a state like Arizona. You look at the 2018 Senate race and how Kristen Sinema managed to flip that seat blue. You can really see that there were warning signs for those states flipping as well. And, the same way that Trump was able to break through and flip reliable Democratic states in 2016, Biden was able to flip reliable Republican states in 2020. Obama could do that in 2008 as well, because Virginia and North Carolina were also a bit historic in a way. But we don't have time for that. But it's like also, analyzing these states, most of these states really don't show me any signs that they could, realistically flip. Most of them don't. Montana at times had shown signs. Now, Montana last went blue in 1992 when Bill Clinton won the state. It was close in 2008, but McCain still won by 2.3. Since then, though, it's been double-digit wins for the Republicans ever since. And what really gives me no confidence that Montana can flip is that you look at 2024, and we're just going to put the flip states on. Montana, the Senate seat flipped red in 2024. In 2020, the governor race, Montana's governorship flips blue. Also flips red. So Montana had Democrats at the statewide level, but now they don't. They got rid of all of them. So Montana really showed me no confidence. And again, I don't really see any states that could. Texas, which had been Republican since 1980, showed me a sign in 2020 that maybe things could be changing, as Trump only won it by 5.6%, down from his 9-point win in 2016, or Romney's 16-point win in 2012, or McCain's 12-point win in 2008, especially down from Bush's 23-point win in 2004. But now that we see Trump winning the state by 14 points in 2024, I don't know. I genuinely don't know if Texas is still in play for the Republicans anymore. Alaska is an interesting state, seeing as it's always been double digits, but it's been narrowing a bit ever since 2012. It's been narrowing. It's a state that actually swung the most right in 2012, and since then hasn't been safe. There have been some signs that tell me Alaska could potentially flip. The 2022 House race in Alaska, we did see a Democrat win by 10 points. But then they lost a seat in 2024. So I don't really think Alaska's the answer either for a state that could flip. And there's not really too many states that could really, that I really see have any realistic chance that are in the red wall or red sea that could flip. I just don't see any. I think that Democrats losing more blue wall states is more likely than Republicans losing any more red wall states, because, again, the only state that they could really say are Alaska and Texas. And in both cases, Democrats really aren't making any ground in any of these states. They just aren't. That's why I'm so reluctant to believe that. Again, if you consider North Carolina a red wall state, which, to be fair, it has only voted blue one time since 1976, and that was, of course, when Obama won the state by just 0.33 in 2008. If you count North Carolina, that's certainly vulnerable. It's been under 5% in every election since. But besides that, I really don't see any.